recently, 2 years ago, the fundamental message that consumers should be taking today, it is financially insane to buy anything other than a Tesla. It will be like owning a horse in 3 years. So what is different between Tesla and the other companies now? Tesla didn't try to conserve an old business model, the old supply chain. He didn't try to, or that company didn't try to stabilize things as they are. What Tesla did was to look into the future, what is surrounding the supply chain, like the climate crisis, knowing that in 20 years or 30 years from now, it will be very unlikely that combustion engines will still make sense, because we know we can't burn fuel any longer. And they turned this not just in a business opportunity, they turned it in a early mover advantage. So maybe even not the first mover advantage, but in an early mover advantage. Let's have a look at this picture now. This is the supply chain of an anonymous car manufacturer. So every dot on this slide represents one company, a supplier. So somewhere in the center, one dot is the car brand. And where car manufacturers nowadays are really good in already, think about BMW. I think they are able to go several tiers back to depict the supply chain, almost like a metro system. And I'm not saying this shouldn't be done. This is great that they are able to do that. The complexity that we also talked about in the presentations before, really covering all this is really great, and what companies should do, also controlling this complexity. But we should not forget there's also things outside of this circle. Have we overlooked something by only trying to stabilize the supply chain and controlling it? Isn't that maybe this metro system thinking and not the ecological thinking that I was talking about? I can also maybe use another metaphor for exactly the same. Some of you, maybe the older people, at least my age, will recognize what is going on in this picture. It's from the movie Titanic. So this might be your dance floor now. Dance floor in terms of your company has a business model. They are thriving. They're happy. They are doing the right things. They have the right customers. Everything seems to fit. So you're dancing the stability dance on that level. But if you look around you, something big might happen. So maybe it's not your company or your supply chain that is the dance floor that you need to manage, that you need to stabilize, that you need to look at. Maybe something bigger is happening around you on other dance floors. In this case, the sinking ship of the Titanic, that might be our climate system, but it might also be the digital environment around us, new inventions that have been made that will soon, think about this Kodak example also, that many people will certainly know, going extinct when the digital camera was invented. The same might happen with other technologies like machine learning. So always think about this bigger picture and the dance floor around you. Don't forget that when creating a business model and a service and a product. Yeah, and this picture here is quite a new one from the World Economic Forum. I took this from them, talking about the risks, the top 10 risks, the ones with the highest impact on companies nowadays. So this comes not from a climate activist or from climate researchers, but still 5 of them, that's the green ones, are environmental risks, climate action, biodiversity loss, etc. And also others are societal, like infectious diseases, so COVID, livelihood crisis. Number 3 is weapon of mass destruction. So all these big things that are happening here around us should really teach us how will the future look like in 20 years, exactly like Tesla did. How can this threat to humanity be turned into a business opportunity? Because things will change, and they will change dramatically for many businesses and many industries. Yeah, this is another view. I don't only want to talk about these risks. This is the DHL Trend Radar. I could also have brought the Gartner Hype Cycle or similar models showing you what is around you in 5 years, 10 years from now, technological solutions or new business trends. Allow me, that's my last slide now, just to talk also quickly about what we do at CBS to cover all this, because we have a graduate diploma in supply chain management where we try to look at all these trends and put them in our curriculum. So if you live in the Copenhagen area, also in southern Sweden, Copenhagen area, then you might be joining our program, the HD in supply chain management, which is a 2 years program. That's it from my side. So now I'm curious about your questions and your thoughts.
Thank you, Andreas. And, yet another really productive and important presentation to really shedding light on this transformational process. I have a few questions, and one is an interesting one. If you owned or supervised a supply chain, what would be the first thing you would do to future-proof it?
Yeah, future proofing is really the core aspect of transformation. And I would say really try to get rid of rigid, stable ideas. So try to get rid of the idea that you can control that beast. Supply chains don't behave like a stable engineered system. And I think many of you know this. So that means somehow turning ecological thinking into or using this in workshops, maybe this should become part of your company culture. Of course, at times, especially in the short term, it is very important to stabilize things and also have, I also promote this really to have standardized processes wherever this is needed. But for certain things, this is impossible. So maybe from time to time, really strategically think about how will the world look like in 5 and 10 years from now? So exactly the thought that Elon Musk had when he started the company, or when they started the company back then. I think this is really important. So I would say strategizing about these big potential changes would be very important.
Mm. Strategizing about big potentials, threatens, and also being solution orientated, which you also mentioned. And I was thinking,
Absolutely.
what do you find? I mean, you also, of course, lifted challenges and so forth. What do you find are sort of the current challenges for the sector of supply chain when it comes to really implementing these transformations? What are usually sort of the key challenges there?
Yeah, I mean, I focused very much in my presentation on two environmental aspects, biodiversity, climate, but technologies that are around us. So not overlooking them. I think this is essential for a survival of companies and of supply chains also. So we should also not forget other layers. So think about these different dance floors. There might also be a political level. Brexit and Trumpism is a result also of maybe outsourcing too much, or outsourcing too much also is has created problems during the COVID crisis. So always being critical and always trying to think about, is it right at this moment in time what we are doing, and maybe what was right in the past might be wrong in the future, or the other way around.
So constantly reevaluating strategies because the world is constantly changing as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Andreas, thank you so much for really giving us an insightful presentation and for all the work that you do. And in addition to that, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, post the COVID pandemic, we all know that the workplace has transitioned. It started with remote working, and now it's sort of transitioning into a hybrid where we have remote working, but where the office space is more becoming an experiential area where you go to for creativity, flexibility, teamwork, and so forth. And it's also becoming a space where you use smart and physical space and digital technology. And to this, we need to add the need to attract and retain talent. And we now see new infrastructure for this enabled by emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain that are really going to be able to help companies not only to focus on hiring, but also managing, retaining, and developing employees, remembering this sort of lifelong learning that also needs to be excelled. Now, the topic of transforming the world of work with technology is what our next session will highlight and what our last speaker of today will be speaking about. And our last speaker is Andrew Spence, who is a workforce futurist and also a global speaker who will be talking about this topic. So I say warm welcome to Andrew. Thank you for joining us via link, and I hand over the word to you.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's a real honor to be speaking with you at the Optilon Supply Chain Conference. So, a question is, why am I speaking about work technology and blockchain at a supply chain conference? Well, where I live in the UK, supply chain has been in the news. Supply chain is being blamed for the lack of a very important liquid that comes in small glass bottles and is key for keeping the British economy running smoothly. No, not COVID vaccines, beer, of course. Yes, some pubs in England have run out of beer. Well, the shock and the horror. And the reason is supply chain issues. However, the real reason is not a shortage of beer, but a shortage of lorry drivers to deliver the beer. This is a human supply chain issue, if you like. But it looks like this pub in London has cracked it by delivering barrels of beer by bike. Now, if you work in supply chain, then thank you. Your work has been very visible and important in the last 2 years, not for beer, but vaccines, food, and goods. Now, my passion is making work better. I've worked on over 30 global transformation programs, from futuristic scientific research campuses in the Swiss mountains to vast train depots in Berlin and Gothic prisons in London. I've seen the good and the bad of work, but one thing that will make our work better, in my opinion, is fixing the infrastructure. So today, I'm going to talk about how work is unbundling as a decentralized workforce responds to the digital COVID age. I'll also outline how blockchain will play a key role in building this new infrastructure for work. And I'll finish on what this means for work, careers, and the firm. So, we're at the intersection of some megatrends that have been moving slowly but are accelerating now. The decentralized workforce, there are more ways to earn and learn using digital platforms. Industries are restructuring, as we've heard today, due to the economic impact of the pandemic. And a new infrastructure of work is being built as we move from the first generation internet business models to what's known as Web 3. There's no need to explain the concepts of bundling and unbundling to supply chain experts. In music, for example, we've seen our physical vinyl records with 10 tracks replaced with streaming songs on Spotify, the album unbundled into songs. And the typical job can be disaggregated into its component tasks pretty easily. We also have a rapidly changing global workforce. Earlier, Matt talked about how consumers are changing, and all of this applies to our workforce too, with implications for employers. So, of the 3.3 billion people employed worldwide, 2 billion are informally employed, and over half of the world's working age women are not in the formal labour force. So there's many ways to earn and learn in the 2020s, from labourers to playbourers, carers to sharers, preachers to teachers. A job, contract with the associated boss, fixed hours and salary is not the answer for everyone. In the USA, for example, up to 1 in 7 working age adults have worked via a platform at some point. Now, I realize this model is different in the Nordic region and in the UK, but it's interesting that this trend is happening. So as work is unbundled into tasks, An untapped workforce can use these platforms to work outside of traditional employment. Millions are earning income from platforms like Substack, Fiverr, Twitch, Shopify, and Teachable. But before we jump ahead too far into the future, it's always useful to look back for a moment. What has the internet ever done for HR? Are there any Monty Python fans out there, I wonder? Well, the internet has brought us lots of benefits, from emails to PDFs and even to, Zoom. But in the age of Google search, our career data is not so easily searchable. There's poor visibility of recruitment of information on available workers and vacancies. So that leads to inefficient matching. And that is pretty much why we have a recruitment and staffing industry. We're willing to pay the fees to avoid the hassle. 774 million people have profiles on LinkedIn. We provide our career history free, and LinkedIn then sells this data to recruiters and salespeople. So many workers, especially those with in-demand skills, are opting out due to spam a lot. So we have some problems in the plumbing of how we secure work. How might it be fixed? Well, when you think of blockchain, you might think of Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is everything you don't know about money combined with everything you don't know about computing. But don't worry, I'm not going to be talking about Bitcoin today. I'm going to be talking about blockchain, which is the underlying technology behind Bitcoin and far more interesting. Now, a lot has been said about blockchain. What we do know is that it doesn't talk to you, it can't do funny robot dancing, and in technology terms, really, it's a slow database. However, of all the emerging technology, blockchain could be the most impactful on work and society. Blockchain is a decentralized database shared among a network of computers, all of which must approve an exchange before it can be recorded. In short, blockchain is a ledger of blocks. And the main features of blockchain. We can use blockchain to exchange digital assets without friction, so a central ledger is no longer required. We can execute digital smart contracts, so documents can be stored and be verified as authentic. We can store digital records. And this data is encrypted in the links holding the blocks together with a unique code called a hash. And of course, it's decentralized. The data's in time-stamped blocks. So there is a lot of excitement about blockchain in financial services, also with medical records and even voting. I also know there are big opportunities to use blockchain in supply chain too, from tracking mangoes to blood diamonds. And blockchain can help in the human supply chain too, which I'll come on to. Workforce technology includes all the technology needed for employers to hire, onboard, track, and find out how employees are feeling, and most importantly, pay workers. There's been a massive investment in work tech recently. For example, Salesforce bought Slack for $28 billion last year. And in one of my recent articles, I identified 24 work tech unicorns. And there are exciting developments in using behavioral science and AI to predict what makes great teams too, from using organizational network analysis to observe team coherence, to look at employee sentiment analysis. And there's even a small photo there of me and Harry, the HR robot. But don't worry, I've met him. He won't be taking our jobs anytime soon. And many of our systems that we use really crystallize some of our 20th century management and HR processes that are way past their sell-by date. For example, our humble CV or resume has been used to apply for jobs since its invention by Leonardo da Vinci in the 15th century, when he applied for a job with the Duke of Milan. And in one survey recently, nearly 80% of candidates admit to lying on their CVs, which I'm sure doesn't apply to any of you. where studied at Harvard can mean studied Harvard Business Review. But thankfully, a new generation of verifiable digital profiles are being developed that will help the job market. Skills and experiences are verified by issuing entities like employers or universities, and they need to be verified only once. So instead of giving up the data willingly, we control it ourselves. Over time, we can build up digital badges and accomplishments, and we can then choose to share those with future employers using these peer to peer platforms. Now, you might recognize the fellow on the right, who I believe is active in the job market. He's got some excellent credentials, including key projects, Casino Royale, and Skyfall. Blockchain is a technology looking for a problem to solve. We've heard that before. Now, the chief exec of Workday, which is one of the largest software as a service companies in the HR space, has said. And we've also got the non-profit Velocity Foundation, which is building the Internet of Careers. And the members of that include many of the workforce, technology, and staffing industry players you may well have heard of: Aon, SAP, Randstad, Korn Ferry. And this offers members the ability to issue, share, and verify career credentials, reinventing how career records are shared across the global job market. So those Workday and Velocity themselves represent nearly 1 billion workers. So this is happening, folks, and watch this space. Now, Decentraland is the first decentralized 3D virtual world. It operates as a multiplayer role-playing game. You can buy virtual land, then build whatever content and experiences you want, including concerts, games, and art shows. Recently, some virtual land was sold for $1 million. Now, what's interesting to me about Decentraland is it's a decentralized autonomous organization known as a DAO. So the community proposes and votes on policy updates and land auctions. So it's a new way to finance projects, govern communities, and share value. Now, another example is Mirror. It's also a community-owned and operated publishing platform. So the community votes for writers to be invited to the platform, and then they hold right tokens, which it is hoped will appreciate in value as the publication grows. So these virtual environments will develop over years in specific communities like the creators, in publishing and investment. But the DAOs are only going to be as good as the trust within that community, but providing a very promising mechanism to facilitate the next generation of organizations to watch. So we've had the mega trends of the decentralized workforce, new technology emerging, including these digital career profiles. What are the implications on careers and jobs and the firm? Well, I see it happening in stages over the next decade or so. In the first wave, I think we're going to organize our career and hiring data better with better candidate verification. I think this will enable more efficient labor markets and hopefully more trust in work. I think in wave two, we'll see more seamless work matching using these platforms with more independent workers and fairer pay. Also, society is and needs to adapt to a more attractive and fairer labor market. And as mentioned before, lifelong learning is a constant theme here. And there's going to be many ways of being paid for our time, our attention, and our data. Wave three, we're looking in the crystal ball a bit here, but into the coming decade, organizations will be able to find workers they need when they need it, pulling from a liquid workforce. And in this scenario, there's no need for large enterprises. The onus will be on leading work, not necessarily employees. And we will see more autonomous organizations and diverse networks of teams. Now that's coming to the conclusion of my short talk. As work unbundles, I think it will unbundle in interesting ways, enabling new ecosystems of workers. It sounds like a great story of individuals flourishing, allowing people to work together in teams. I think that will be the real story. Now, we're not all going to hold a concert in Decentraland, but some of us might make a living without the need for a boss. So here's some takeaways from this session. I think the biggest change needed isn't to our databases, but our mindset, how we think about work, money, and value. I think technology is going to enable billions more people to learn and earn in diverse ways. For people listening today, it might be an opportunity to think about digital credentials, the Internet of Careers, and how these work platforms might impact your organization. You can try out new decentralized products, for example, internet browsers like Brave, digital wallets like MetaMask, virtual worlds like Decentraland, or in publishing like Mirror. And I've left you some knowledge nodes for your network here, a few links of useful resources, including Don Tapscott's TED Talk and a PDF paper I wrote about this subject that you can download, and links to my Workforce Futurist newsletter. Final thoughts. So in conclusion, we've had a short skip today from a beer supply chain crisis in the UK to a look at the infrastructure of the human supply chain. And we've had some help from Leonardo da Vinci and, of course, my trusty compatriots, Monty Python and James Bond. But a new infrastructure of work is being built using Web3 that will empower individuals and teams to have more autonomy and equity. I think we can rebuild work to be fairer by fixing some of the plumbing of the human supply chain. The world is something we make, so let's make it better. And we can start by getting involved. So I'd love to hear your views. Do keep in touch with me. And thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for taking the time to be with us today and to also paint such a great picture. I mean, both a present but also a future observation of what is going to really happen within the workplace, the workforce, and talent, and how, like you say, it's going to be a lifestyle and a new kind of mindset that we're adopting to. I was just thinking, in being a futurist and also coming in contact with speakers and leaders around the world, do you find that this mind shift is already in motion, which I presume, or are people really understanding the mind shift that is needed on a bigger scale?
Now, that's a really good question. I think it's been evolving and it comes in fits and spurts. I think the COVID pandemic has given people a time to respond to the shock, but also to think about the lifestyle that they want in the future. And I think that includes work, and includes home, and includes family, how to make a living. So I think the COVID pandemic has been horrendous for many people, but will also give people an opportunity to think about how they want to live in the future. And people have tried different things in the pandemic. People have developed their side hustle to write or create videos or teach or I don't know, bring pets for a walk using a platform. So people have tried different things. And I think that's a great thing that people can build on from this pandemic.
Yeah, and I think that's a good summary, because when you look at the pandemic now, 1.5 years nearly later, it really, it's a catastrophe in so many senses, but it's also a sense of being a catalyst for humanity to really look at the way we're living, the way that we're working, the way we're co-creating and all of that, and sort of developing ourselves from a start. I have two questions from viewers, and one of it is, what are the typical barriers to leading work, like you mentioned, instead of leading employees? Just to maybe clarify that.
Yeah, I think typically if a new piece of work comes into the vision, I think our first instinct is, right, we need some people to do this work. Let's see who we've got internally. Then if we don't, let's see who we can hire externally. Okay, let's look at the temporary market. And then you go down a list that says, well, oh dear, we can't find people at the right price. Maybe we need to invest in some automation for this process. Could we re-engineer it and do it in a different way? Or do we even need to do that piece of work in the first place? So I think there's kind of like a hierarchy as people go through sourcing and designing work.
And next question, what could a supply chain professional do to get better at this discipline?
Well, I think there's loads of opportunities of using, I guess, new technology like AI and blockchain in supply chain. I think my expertise is around using emerging technology in the world of work and HR. But if I was to, in the parallel world of supply chain, I think is getting familiarity with this new world, and it might be getting used to things like tokenization of work. I mentioned some examples of using web browsers where instead of getting adverts pointed at you, you're actually choosing which adverts you see and getting crypto tokens that you can use in whichever way you want. So I think it's just getting a little bit familiar with this new technology as it emerges. And I think that will allow people to get a bit of an understanding of how it could be applied into supply chain.
I also wanted to ask you, because leadership is a topic that is so relevant, and I'm thinking with sort of the technology coming, the automation processes in motion, and then people being, remote working. How do you see, or what do you see in the transition of the leadership of, let's say, yesterday and the transition to leadership today and going forward? What are sort of the key components of leadership?
Well, I think we're in a very interesting phase for that because 40 to 50% of workers in some cities have been able to work remotely, and so there's a real shift in leadership from working out how can we get people to be productive, healthy, and work well in teams when I can't physically see them. That's the challenge, and I think that's for some people they've been used to working like that for 10 or 20 years. And for others, it's new. So I think it's something that we're getting used to. But I think I think it's really important that mindset has shifted from a command and control kind of emphasis of seeing my workers in the office to trusting them to get the work done wherever they are. That's a major shift. And I think we've been dragged through that shift with COVID, but it's here to stay.
Andrew, thank you so much for your presentation and for all the work that you do and for enlightening us also on this aspect. And stay safe and healthy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, dear viewers, we've come to the end of the first live broadcast of the Supply Chain Conference. I know everyone at Optilon really hope it's been rewarding, insightful, relevant, hopefully increase your know-how, or maybe even given you tools on how to really, thrive in uncertainty and prepare for the future. And I also want to thank all of our speakers who've been speaking on these different topics that have all sort of circled around supply chain, but also around sustainability, resilience, transparency, and that word collaboration, because that is truly the way forward to thrive in uncertainty, is for us to come together and collaborate. Now, if you want to review this recording, or it will be a recording as it's not live then it will be an on-demand feature on the Optilon website. So if you want to review it or want to recommend it to any colleague, and also if you want to learn more about resilience and sort of dive more into the topic and also know the tools that already exist, please go into the Optilon website and you can read more about that then. And remember, you are all doing such great and important work within the supply chain sector, as we also heard today. I mean, it's imperative for our society. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and stay safe and healthy, and hopefully see you next year when the Supply Chain Conference will happen again. So stay tuned.